The Toronto Ultra officially confirmed their entire four-man lineup coming into the second year of franchising, coming into Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War. We already knew that they had officially kind of re-signed Kleenex and Cammy, but it was just released that Methods and Bance will officially be re-signing with the team. Now, this is kind of more of a quiet move. I'll be honest. I got on social media, was kind of glancing through a few different subjects, and I realized that, oh, Toronto Ultra announced their full lineup. And I will say news recently has not been good for Toronto, for those that have kind of been following the story or at least are somewhat aware of it. They basically have a run-in with one of their prior players in Brack. Really a very in-depth story, something that really from a media standpoint does not look good from the Ultras perspective, at least in terms of how they responded to it. I won't get into the very, inner workings of that, but it definitely doesn't sound like a good situation by any means, especially from the Ultras perspective, and the way that Brack is kind of handling it. It just doesn't seem as if they're in a good place right now. We're just going to go ahead and call it that. But in terms of this announcement specifically, which again kind of goes under the radar, a lot of people already weren't under the impression that Kleenex and Cammy were already on this team. But for the Ultra, it's huge, right? Because you get two young players who were both fantastic last season. Cammy was heavily under the radar. I had an interview with Clayster, I want to say around the third or fourth home series of the year. And he was already telling me that Cammy's one of the better players in the game. Like, Cammy's a bright star. Be looking out for this guy, Cammy. And eventually, I feel like he really kind of got the respect that he deserved, considering the placement that he had at Champs last year under units. Comes into this season and really just has an all-star performance in a lot of different ways. Wasn't always, kind of the shining star for the Ultra, but kind of toward the end of the season, it was very clear that he was one of the best players on this team and looked like one of the better players in the CDL without question. And then you have a guy in Kleenex, right, who joins kind of at joins the starting lineup toward the end of the season. One of the many players for the Ultra who kind of got the call to be on the starting lineup at one point. And he was the guy who stayed, right? He was the guy who was fixed on this team, was, kind of called up to this roster, stayed with it, and made them made them the best form of them that we saw throughout the year, because they closed out the season winning the Toronto home series. Their placements to close out the year were excellent. You could kind of argue champs, top six, however you want to kind of phrase that. But just in general, made a huge impact on this team and clearly was one of their best players. And at times, to me, looked like their best player in the game, no question. Now, when we talk about Methods and Bance staying on the team, I will say I'm not 100% sure why the long wait. I'm not sure if that was just from a media perspective, them kind of waiting for news to die down. We saw a number of different content pieces coming from guys like Methods, who has kind of been the face of this roster since they originally formed, which has been great for them. He was the only player that had been on the Ultra throughout the entirety of the season. It was kind of like, why do we not know what is kind of already known? And so I'm not sure if that was maybe the players expressing, their interest in wanting to go elsewhere. I'm not sure if that was maybe Bance, looking at the London Royal Ravens, thinking, hey, the Twins are gone. Maybe I could have an opportunity to reunite with, guys like Shawnee, etc. Or if it was, Methods looking at a few different opportunities himself, saying, hey, there's a lot of rosters that are starting to, form. Maybe I could find myself somewhere else. So I'm not sure exactly the reason why it's delayed, and it very well could strictly be because of the fact that they want to kind of distance it. It could have been because of the Brack news, etc. Classic, of course, is the only member that ends up not staying on this team. He's a free agent. But I feel like for both Methods and Bance, they had solid seasons last year, really. Bance gets added after the first event. There's a lot of drama with the Ultra team, especially out of the gates in terms of roster changes. And he was really a positive force for them in a lot of different ways. There's a lot of talk and rumor about how Bance was looking really great for them, especially in scrimmages, how he could be a top player in this game. And I feel like he did at times kind of start to shift out from time to time, but clearly was great for the Ultra throughout the majority of the season. Always was kind of making a positive impact around the map. At times really kind of took over for the Ultra in the best way possible. And again, Methods has pretty much an all-around solid season. Really had some big clutches at the end of the year. He's the reason why the Ultra ends up, kind of claiming that championship at their own home series to win the event. Obviously gets kind of their first championship or, home series victory as a franchise. Really, like I said, it was the face of this team and was by far the player that I expected to be on the Ultra moving into next season. Now, when we talk about the Ultra as a whole, because again, they got better throughout the year. I don't mind this strategy of what they're trying to do because they're bringing everybody back. I wouldn't have minded, though, if they would have gone out and maybe seeked some other pieces to at least kind of test out the market. Now, I'm not sure if that was possible. I'm not sure if that was something that they even thought about. But I think from a management perspective, it wouldn't have been the worst idea to maybe kind of bring in another piece. I'm not sure exactly who's that piece that you leave out along with Classic. I'm not sure who that piece is that you bring in. But I think that there is room for improvement to kind of bring this team possibly to another level. Because, again, they looked great kind of toward the end of the season. They're having some great placements. They obviously look great when it comes down to champs. Send the Dallas Empire to a Game 5. But I still feel like the route that they've gone is not a bad one, but I feel like there was a better option in some cases for them. And they're one of only 3 teams that looks to be not signing any different players to the starting lineup. The Ultra, Empire, and what sounds like the Mutineers are going to be pretty much the same mixture of teams. It looks as if the Mutineers, obviously with Frosty leaving the team, it only kind of sounds right that the other 4 are going to be re-signed to the starting lineup. Again, that's not confirmed, but it just seems to be the case. And again, kind of going into a new title, the positive for a lot of these teams, Empire, Mutineers, if they do it, obviously Ultra now, going into a new title, they know the pieces they have, right? They know where they sit. And again, they did see major improvements throughout the season. You could argue that pretty much every single roster change that they made, for the most part, from a results standpoint, actually made them a better roster overall. Again, they win the Toronto home series. Prior to that event, they start placing well. They get knocked out top 6 at champs. Again, they send the Dallas Empire, the team who would go on to win the event and win it in dominant fashion in the finals versus Atlanta. They take them to a Game 5. So I think from the Ultras' perspective, it's not a bad move. But I don't think that it's necessarily a move that I'm looking at and applauding and saying, wow, look at that team. Because I think that they have a good group together. I think they are going to be a solid team. But I think that possibly the issues that they've had from a media standpoint, the issues that they've had when it comes down to this story in particular about how serious this was. And there have been rumors about Classic as well, kind of having a few different situations, Cammy. I think that possibly could have hurt them if they had interest in possibly seeking out a few different guys. I don't think they're at the bottom, but I also don't think they're at the top either. And it's hard because there have been a lot of teams who aren't 100%, kind of confirmed as of yet. But I do think they are going to be in a good position. And I think, again, at the very least, for this team in particular, who looked good to close out the year, they are kind of riding high moving into next season. Granted, because of their performance, I think you've got some really solid pieces here. Cammy and Kleenex, I think, can be all-stars for them moving into next year. I think those guys have a lot of potential to kind of progress throughout the CDL. I think Kleenex in particular is somebody who I've been very, very excited about ever since that Singularity team back in Black Ops 4 where he just took over with the SOG, knocked out Envy and has that top 12 placement. Ever since that moment, everyone has known this guy is special. And I think him paired alongside Cammy, paired alongside Manson Methods, it is a good team because I think the chemistry is going to be there. I think they're going to have a lot on their side. They re-signed the coach in Marky B. They're going to be in a good position. And I think that they honestly have the ability to start off the season hot. Because again, you are thinking about a team who has been together. The coaching staff is the same. The players are the same. They're going to be playing a new game in terms of Cold War. They're going to be playing a new format in 5v5 to 4v4. But I think for a guy like Methods, that helps him. I think for a lot of the SMGs on this team, that is going to be beneficial as well. So from an overall perspective, I think the move from Ultra is good. I don't think it's as good as it could have been, but I think that they also do have a lot of potential, at least in the early portions of the season, to see more success and to really get off to a good start, considering that they do have a lot of the same guys together, and considering the fact that this is going to be a team coming into year 2 and not a whole lot of rosters have the ability to say that.